You are completely limiting your potential by only using the one brain that you've been given as a human being. Now, if you're anything like me, you enjoy learning, you wish that you could learn more, faster, more effectively, more frequently, and more often. In this video, we're going to be talking about how you can develop a second brain to not only read faster, read better, read more effectively, and keep all this information, but most importantly, implement what you've read, remember what you've read, and use it at the time that it matters and is the most important. Now, learning is important because it turns you into a high-value human being. The more high-value you are, the more useful you are to yourself, the more effective you are for yourself and the people around you. Learning helps you become happier, healthier, make more income, and just overall helps you blaze a much better path throughout your life. Now, if you think about it, most learning is done through a handful of different ways, either through visuals, reading, or a hands-on experience. Today, we're going to be specifically talking about the reading aspect of learning and how you can get better at it by developing a second brain. Now, I came across a tweet recently that I really love from a guy named Vala Afshar, and he is the chief of digital strategy at Salesforce, which is currently a company that is valued at over $150 billion. And the tweet says, "Reading can seriously damage your ignorance." And what that means is if you think about how much information we consume on a daily basis, we start to create these limiting beliefs and we think of ideas as permanent. And the great thing about reading works of art from people in our past, people throughout ancient history, and even authors from today that cover specific topics, is that it forces us to challenge those beliefs and consider that our perspectives might be inaccurate, wrong, or just not fully developed. And so the reason I love that tweet is because the more that you read throughout time, the more you challenge yourself on your own thoughts, which means you start to develop a better understanding of the topic that you're reading about. And I love that tweet by him. Now, before we dive in, there's some really strong misconceptions about reading in general that we need to understand. And this is something that we've all fallen victim to, and it comes from, since we were at a very early age, going to school. Now, the education model teaches us throughout school that when we read something, the goal is to read it start to finish, front to back, memorize as much as we possibly can, because then we're going to be tested on that subject matter. And this is just simply not true as an adult, and as you start to go through learning and reading and just becoming a better, more well-rounded human being. So the reality is that you don't even need to read a book in its entirety. You don't even need to read a book from the beginning of the book. You can find a chapter or a segment of a book that is interesting to you and start there. The only goal of reading and learning is just to find the key takeaways that are going to impact your life specifically. I want to encourage you to drop the habit of feeling like you have to read an entire book front to back and like you have to memorize the entire thing. I don't remember every single thing that I read, but I am going to show you what works for me. Some of my excuses in the past were just that I simply didn't have the time to read. I didn't like reading. I wasn't good at reading. I always kept procrastinating. That's something that I struggled with a lot because I felt like if I was going to pick up a book that I would need to read the entire book, which meant I kept putting it off because I felt like I wasn't capable of doing that at the time. Maybe you just simply don't know what you're interested in, you don't know what your topics are. If you want me to make a video in the future talking about how to find your passions, your purpose, your hobbies, be sure to comment below and I will make a video on that in the future. Now, I've read tons of books over the years, and it's a huge part of what has helped me become successful in my 20s and in my early 30s. Now, what I do is I normally pick a topic that is currently relevant in my life. And so as an example, I really struggle with perfectionism. So over the past few months, I've been focused on perfectionism and overcoming it. And I've been reading a book called Overcoming Perfection. I've also watched lectures on perfectionism on YouTube. I read a book called Stop Overthinking by Nick Trenton, which is great. I will put that link to that book in the description if that's something that you resonate with. When I pick a topic, that is how I choose a book that I want to read from because I'm currently interested in that topic. So that means my desire to learn is fueled by my frustration on that topic or just my eagerness to learn more about that topic, which is how I pick a book. And then that's also what fuels me to be more consistent with reading that book. Now, the key part is how do I take information from that book and remember it, internalize it, and then use it to become more effective in my own life. And that's what we're going to get into now. The biggest aid for doing this is using technology to your benefit. Technology can be your friend if you use it the right way. Now, if you think about what we normally do with a book, especially going back to high school, you just read a book, you highlight it, maybe take some notes on a piece of paper, and that's kind of it. You then maybe take a test on that book or a quiz on that book and you move on. And I bet if you think back to the books that you read in high school, you probably don't remember, especially the textbooks that were on certain topics. You might remember the stories because of how they made you feel and the characters that you resonate. But when you're reading nonfiction books and you're trying to learn different topics to increase your knowledge, it is very easy to forget this information, and it is easy to not carry it along with you as you move forward throughout life. So we're going to talk about how technology can be your second brain. You can build a database of information that you can refer back to later and take notes on these topics in your second brain, which is your digital database, so that way you can use this information. Now, our brain can only hold so much information, so there is one golden rule before we dive into how to build your second brain, and that is that the human brain can really only focus on a topic intensely for about 20 minutes at a time. Reading is not this big obstacle in your life. It is something that can be simple if you choose to see it that way. Now, if you think about it, we're already carrying around tons of data and information on our devices at all times anyways. So you sort of already have a second brain, but I would bet that you haven't taken the time to really develop and organize it. If you think of most people's phones, photo albums, their files on their computer, their email inbox, their text messages, tons of these things go unread, unchecked, unorganized, unfiltered, and it just creates this mess in your life. We are not going to do that with what I'm talking about today. We're going to create an organized system for you to develop your second brain, collect information, organize that information, and then implement that information so that you can become a better, more well-rounded human being. Now, a really great example of this is a quote that I love from Ryan Holiday, who talks a lot about stoicism. He says that books are simply meant to take you on a journey and leave you with something. That is it. That is the entire purpose of a book. Now, Ryan himself has a strategy for how he organizes information in his brain, and I'll let you hear directly from him now.
I'm highlighting the things that I'm liking. And then what I do as a writer, because I want to use a lot of this information, is I then transfer the stuff that I really liked or that really impacted me, and I put them on note cards. And so I just write the thought that I had that it inspired, or I write down the story, and then I sort those note cards by theme. So I'm kind of creating like an exterior brain that organizes the stuff that I took from the books.
So as you can see, Ryan references taking tons of notes on note cards, and you can absolutely do that if you feel that it would work for you. Some people love to write in a journal, write in a diary. They love the physical idea of taking notes. I personally do not like that. I'm not consistent with it, and I don't know what to do with them once I'm done. I don't really like the idea of having tons of notebooks or big Tupperwares full of index cards. It's just not the style of my own life. It doesn't work with how I like to organize things. So what I like to recommend is that you do this digitally. Now, the tool that I recommend is called Notion, but you can do this within anything. You can do this in the Notes app on your phone, and you can do this in Google Docs. One objection that I get from people is maybe you don't like to type, and that is perfectly fine. There are other ways that you can do this. First of all, you can dictate notes directly through your phone. You can click on the microphone, you can just speak out loud, simply reading your highlights from a book or just your open thoughts from your mind, and it will dictate them into the notes on your phone. Now, you can also use a service like Rev or Temi, and you can just make a voice memo. So that way, you don't need to worry about articulating everything perfectly. You can just leave a voice memo and kind of ramble into your phone. Then you can take that file and upload it into a tool like Temi, and it does cost a couple dollars, but that will auto-transcript your voice memos into notes that you can then edit or just simply copy and paste into something like Notion or Google Docs. And that is what I like to do. The idea is that you can now search through these notes. You can use tags to tag your notes based on certain topics, okay? That is why this is so critical. Now, if you think about what our human brain does, there are different regions of the brain that tackle different obstacles and problems based on what we encounter on a daily basis throughout our lives. Our second brain is going to do that exact same thing. You now have compartments in your digital second brain that you can use to tackle certain problems in your life. So let's say that that's self-confidence, or let's say it's relationship building, or let's say it's a romance topic in your life and you're trying to learn more about how to be a better spouse or how to be a better partner. These are all different topics that we can then file away, tag, and search by keywords when we want to reference that information. Let's say that we have a topic that a friend is struggling with. Let's say that they're struggling with depression, and you read a book a few months ago or watched a YouTube video on depression, and you took notes on that and you filed it away in your second brain. You can now search in that tool, such as Notion or in your phone's Notes app, to find that topic on depression to then share with your friend if you find it relevant. This is how you can become a more high-value person. It's how you can become more confident in yourself, learn more, be more organized, and overall just grow your knowledge base that lives not only in your brain, but now in this digital database that has become your second brain. So now you might be wondering, as you move forward throughout life and you're reading books, reading articles, blog articles, watching YouTube videos, how do you then consistently transfer this information into your second brain? And there's a couple of different ways to do it, but Tiago Forte goes through this method called CODE, and what that stands for is capture, organize, distill, and express. Capture information, organize information, and store and implement that information when it's relevant. Another really great example of this would be the COD system, which is collect, organize, and do, which is learned from the Getting Things Done book that was written by David Allen. And David Allen's findings really create the foundation for all productivity, which is collect, organize, do. What this means is, as we're reading books, as we're consuming information every day, this could be Instagram posts, it could be books, it could be articles, it could be a conversation with a friend. We want to get in the habit of collecting thoughts and ideas that are provoking to us in our own brain. So it might just be something that was said that you overheard at an airport or on a flight. It might be something that was mentioned during a discussion you had with your Uber driver. These are all great times to collect information, whether you're reading from a chapter or having a conversation or just reading a social media post that stands out to you. Now, these are also great times to implement reading if you aren't somebody who reads frequently. You have to accept that it's okay to just read a page. It's not a huge commitment. You don't have to read a chapter or an entire book in one sitting. You can read a few pages at a time, and you could easily take 30 seconds to capture your takeaway from that page and transition that into your new second brain or your knowledge database. Another great idea that I love to implement is by having books in my bathroom. And so what I've done is, instead of taking time and wasting time on my phone, I simply replace that with reading a few pages of a book for a few minutes while you're in the bathroom. Okay, so it may sound funny, but it's crucial that you implement this, because you can get stuck on your phone and you're just wasting minutes of your life anyway. When you replace it with reading, obviously you're doing something much more productive, but it also stops you from just wasting time in the bathroom, because people do that all the time. They end up sitting on their phone and all of a sudden your legs are asleep and you've been scrolling through social media for 30 minutes. At the very least, replace that bad habit with a good one like reading. I think that it can be crucial to improving your life and learning with the time that you do have when you're awake. Another great idea is to be on the lookout for people that you follow and making note when they give you book recommendations. So I post book recommendations on my story on Instagram all the time. So if you want to follow me there, just look up my name. It's Mike Metzger. You'll find me there, and keep an eye out on my stories. But do this with all of your mentors and people that you look up to and admire and that you might follow. If you don't have these types of people, that's probably a good indication that you need to follow the right people. Look at mentors, look at business leaders, look at entrepreneurs, look at people that study philosophy and that generally just give good advice. Follow those people and pay attention, or even reach out to them and ask them if they have any good book recommendations. Now, one of my biggest tips that helps me when doing this, and one of the things that has been most effective in helping me absorb knowledge and information, is differentiating the types of books that I read and how I consume them. So what I mean is, if I'm going out of my way to listen to a book that is on a topic that I desperately want to learn about, such as business or specifically about marketing or branding or advertising, usually these are sort of dense topics, right? So I've recently been learning about perfectionism, which is not only a psychological topic, but it's just very dense to learn about. You're learning about your own obstacles, how the human brain works, why you might struggle with procrastination or perfectionism and things like this, especially if you're somebody that's an overthinker. So if you want to tackle this problem in your life, reading is a great way to do it. But sometimes when you have a paperback book, you start to daydream because the topic isn't storytelling. It's not as engaging as reading something like The Alchemist or Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. When you're learning about a dense topic that is knowledge heavy, it is so easy to just drift down the page and daydream, and all of a sudden you flip 7 pages and you realize that you weren't paying attention the whole time. You have to keep rewinding. So what I like to do when I'm learning a really dense topic like business or something technical is I will purchase the Kindle or ebook version of the book, and I will also purchase the audio version of the book. And what I will do is I will read the digital version of the book while I'm listening to someone else read it to me. And this stops me from daydreaming and drifting away from the book, because all I'm doing is focusing on absorbing the information. You know, I've got multiple of my senses that are 100% focused on the book, meaning I'm reading it visually. I'm kind of reading it in my own mind, in my head, because I'm looking at the words. Have someone else reading it to me audibly through my ears. So I'm listening, I'm reading, and I'm sub-vocalizing the book in my own head. And so this is really something that I would recommend trying if you're somebody who maybe struggles to stay in the zone when you're reading a book. Now, if I'm reading a different type of book, like a paperback book, and a good example of this would maybe be something that's a little bit more light reading, something like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck or Good to Great, some of these more simple books that are engaging, kind of more inspiring, but maybe not statistical or technical or psychology books. These are books where they're fun to get a paperback book and highlight and make notes. They're fun to sort of earmark pages there. And that makes a book much more fun when you have a paperback book. And also it's good to be able to have a book you can just throw in your work bag or in your book bag to take with you so that you have something to read, so that you're not always carrying around a Kindle or a tablet or your phone and staying on devices like this all the time. It's great to have a physical book that you can flip through and get your hands on, that you can learn from and scratch up and make notes in. So the conclusion of this video and your first step is to pick a topic that will help you find a book that you want to read. Now, I've given you some great ideas throughout this video, but I've also plugged some links in the description below if you want to learn about reading itself. You want to get better at reading, you want to read faster, you want to read more intently. There's some great books that I recommend down below. One is on building your second brain, which is the topic of this video, and another one is to read faster within 10 days. So within the first 10 days, it'll teach you to read a lot faster, and it's a great recommendation. Now, as I mentioned, once you've chosen a book, you kind of want to plan ahead of time on how you're going to learn from the book. Do you think that it would fit better to buy the Kindle or ebook version and also listen to the audiobook? Or is it just an audiobook experience where maybe you have a road trip coming up or you're traveling and you just want to listen to it while you're kind of sitting there doing whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're sitting in a plane, sitting in the back of an Uber, whatever that might be. Or do you want to get the paperback version so that you're able to flip through the book, highlight it, mark it up, make notes and things like that? So choose that ahead of time before making your purchase. So now imagine that you've already implemented your second brain. Okay, now you've built this knowledge database, you've been reading books for the past couple months. What do you do with it? How does it work? The big benefit here is imagine that you read 2 different books in the past month. Let's say you read one on self-confidence and self-esteem and another one on relationship building and learning to become a good listener. Similar topics, but also different in 2 different books by 2 different authors. Let's say you've taken your notes regardless of how you've read the book. Whether you read a paperback book or listened to the audiobook, you want to transition those notes into your knowledge base. Now, if it's an audiobook and you're doing it through Kindle, you can highlight these notes directly in that app and then copy and paste it into something like Notion or the Notes app in your phone or Google Docs. There's also a really great third-party tool called Readwise, which I'll link in the description below, that does this for you automatically. It even automatically transfers things like tweets and social media posts into your knowledge database or your second brain automatically as well. So I highly encourage you to check that out. So now you have all these notes from both these books in your second brain system. Now, what's great is you can tag these and use keywords, because this is the big difference between just stuffing away note cards or having tons of journals and diaries with notes in them. First of all, you're not likely to go through them, but when you have an app that organizes this, that is on the device that you're using already, that is a great way to always keep information and knowledge on hand with you every single day. Now, imagine you're searching for advice on confidence, but let's say that the book on relationships and becoming a great listener also talks about confidence. You would have tagged that or even copied and pasted the word or topics about confidence in your notes that are in your second brain. So when you go back and you refer to it later and you search for the word confidence, it could pull up notes that are from both of those books. And now you've got a plethora of information that you can learn from, that you can refer back to later, and you can use to just become a more well-rounded, more high-value human being, which is going to help you move your life forward faster, just become a better, more valuable person. Other people will see that in you. You will become more confident. You'll be more proud of yourself. If you're currently reading a book, be sure to leave a comment below this video on what book you're reading so that you can give ideas to other viewers on what they might want to pick up and read as their first book to implement the information that we've gone over today. Now I'm going to leave you with a quote by Benjamin Franklin, and what he says is, "Reading makes a full man, meditation makes a profound man, and discourse makes a clear man." If you have any ideas of what you'd like me to cover in an upcoming video, be sure to leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.